wrapping up our series, What Are We Fighting For? And man, we've been going through this series on marriage and relationships, and wow, it has just been incredible to hear some of the stories of what God is doing in our relationships. Today we're going to be talking about the seasons of marriage, the seasons of marriage. And if you have a Bible handy, or if you have a phone with a Bible app, you can turn to Ecclesiastes chapter 3. We're going to have the verses on the screen if you don't have a Bible with you. And I want to say this is kind of a refresher here for just a moment, because we did a whole series on seasons not too long ago. But I have to say, it is amazing the way seasons work. You know, it finally started to warm up here recently. The weather's gotten hotter the last couple of days. And how many of you, whether it's been you or someone you know, has complained about the weather? Oh my gosh, it's too hot. Right? Isn't it crazy? I mean, we have waited like months and months for weather like this, and the moment it happens, we start to get upset by it. The same thing happens with the rain, right? We say, oh gosh, we need the rain, we need the rain. Oh, it's so great that it's raining. You know, after it's rained like 2 or 3 days, and it's like, okay, when is this rain going to end? You know? It's crazy. We are always looking toward the next season. And it's not just true with the weather, it's true with our lives as well. Let's look at Ecclesiastes chapter 3. It says this: for there is a season, verse 1, for everything, and a time for every activity under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to harvest. A time to wound and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build up. A time to cry and a time to laugh. A time to grieve and a time to dance. Our lives are made up of seasons, and so are our marriages. And so, what are the seasons of marriage? I heard recently that there are 5 seasons of marriage. I want to just take a minute and kind of unpack some of those to kind of give us a frame of reference, okay? So if you're taking notes, the first season is called young love, and that's kind of marked by the beginning of your marriage through the first like 2.5 years, and it is a fun time. You know, if there was like a theme song for this stage, you know, your newlyweds, it would be, I don't know if you remember from the Lego movie, Everything is Awesome, right? Everything is awesome. I'm not going to do that, okay? I want to, but I'm not going to, right? In the early days, it is just exciting. And here's the reality. It's not that we think our spouse has no flaws. It's that we choose in this season not to focus on them. Okay? In that young love, we choose not to focus on their flaws. Instead, we accommodate for them. Okay, then that transitions into what's called realistic love. Realistic love. And that's years 3 through 7 of your marriage. And in the last season, we would accommodate for our spouse, but in this season, that's not happening so much, you know? I mean, before, you'd say of your husband, wow, he's just so relaxed. I mean, he's just so laid back, he's so easygoing, and that turns into, gosh, why is he so lazy? Okay? I mean, with your wife, you might say early on, well, gosh, my wife, she's incredible. I mean, she's just so organized. I mean, she has a plan for everything. She has everything planned and figured out. Now it's like, my wife is such a control freak. You know, what changed? Nothing changed, nothing. But what happened? What happened is you realized you married a real person, right? You stood and you made vows. You said, till death, did I really say that? Right? Like there's no escape clause, okay? And so, and then this thing comes up, it's called the 7-year itch. That's a real thing where, you know, kind of like between 7 and 10 years, you kind of get this thing like, oh, what did I, you know, coyote ugly, you want to gnaw off your leg. But not I haven't experienced that. But anyhow. Anyhow, using the filter. But you know, did you know the average length of a marriage in America? 7.2 years. 7.2 years. It's amazing. But if you can make it past that, you enter what's called the comfortable years, or comfortable love. Comfortable love. That's years 11 through 25. But if we're not careful, it can become the too comfortable years. You know what I'm saying? Where you're just too comfortable with your spouse. You go and we'll walk on eggshells around everyone else, and yet we'll come home and we'll take our spouse for granted. Why? Well, because we're so busy doing all these other things, running around and paying a mortgage and making sure our kids aren't like running in the streets. You know, there's a lot going on in those years. And then afterwards, that goes to renewing love. And that's years 26 through 35. And that's kind of a fun time because, the kids have left the house and you have made it. And now it's almost like a second honeymoon. You're like reliving those young love years because you probably want to call mom and dad before you just stop over to visit. You know what I'm saying? Because they are rediscovering each other. And it can be a real exciting time, I'll say, okay? And then the final stage is what's called aren't you glad you came to church? Transcendent love. Transcendent love, and that's years 35 and beyond. Anybody here 35 and beyond? A couple people. Talk to these people. Raise your hand again one more time. Raise your hand. Everybody look around, okay? Because they have figured something out. They've been able to make it through the difficult times. Go and buy them a cup of coffee, okay? Take them out for lunch and say, would you share with me what you've learned, because, man, they got something to share, okay? Now, oftentimes these seasons of love, these seasons of marriage also coincide with the seasons of our life, like chronologically, but not always. Okay, so let me kind of share an overview of that as well. Okay, your 20s through your early 30s are what's referred to as the discovery years, where we're kind of figuring out who we are, what we want to do, and what we want to be. And sometimes maybe we meet that person. We meet our person during those years. And some discoveries are great, and some discoveries are not so great. But you know what happens a lot of times? And this is just human nature. We discover some things about ourselves that we don't like. They kind of come to the surface in marriage because marriage is meant to be discipleship. It's meant to make us more like Jesus, kind of carve off those rough edges. But a lot of us, you know what we do? Instead of dealing with the discoveries about ourselves, we push it off onto our spouse. Well, if you would just do that, if you would take care of me here, if you would, okay? It's a discovery season. Then that moves into the next stage, known as the building years. And that's your 30s and mid-40s, where you're building a life. You're focusing on your career and building a home and raising a family together, and you have responsibilities. And this is a busy season where you're kind of running all over the place and carting kids here and there in different directions. And if you're not careful, you know what can happen? In your marriage, you and your spouse, you can be kind of going in a parallel direction, but you're going in different courses. You can be running parallel, but be going slowly, drifting apart. You may not even notice because, we can still see each other. I'm taking care of this, and you're taking care of that, but it doesn't come to the surface oftentimes till that next stage. That's called plateau. And that's our 40s through our mid-50s, where things have they've started to stabilize, or maybe you've experienced a big crash in your life. Things have kind of all come down, and you're kind of rebuilding your life. The kids are raised, or they're old enough now they can kind of take care of themselves. They can kind of go out and do their own thing. And you kind of started to wonder, what have I been building? Those last years, we're building a marriage, we're building a career and our finance, we're building all this stuff. And now we have a moment to think, have I been building the right things? Am I building something that really matters? Who am I? And I only have this much left of my life. What am I going to do with the rest of my life? And we come to a decision point. Are we going to reinvest in our marriage, or are we going to think the grass is greener on the other side? Well, let me just kind of, give you a spoiler alert. It's not. The grass is not greener on the other side. In fact, research has found that the divorce rate right now for in our country is around 50%. For second marriages, it's 67%. And for third marriages, it's 73% divorce rate. They did a study on the satisfaction and happiness level for those that remained married versus those that got divorced and were remarried. They found that those who stuck it out in a difficult time, were 78% more likely to say that they were happily married 5 years later, whereas only 19% of those who divorced and remarried reported as being happily married or an increased satisfaction level 5 years later. Now, let me be clear. This is not to dog on anybody who's experienced divorce or who's remarried. Maybe you're one of that 19%, and that is wonderful. And there are some situations, hands down, divorce is needed. And I'll take it to the courthouse myself because there are some biblical grounds for divorce. Okay, don't let anybody tell you otherwise. But who I'm talking to those that are in a difficult season of marriage right now. And you're thinking, well, maybe it might be easier if I get out of this and got into something else. I think those who have been divorced would tell you it's not. It is not. It's one of the most difficult things they've ever walked through in their life. So I'd say this, if at all possible, fight for the marriage you're in. Fight for the marriage that you're in. If we make it to the next stage, That's called the mature years. That's your 50s and 60s. And just like a mature tree, it's during those years it produces some of the best and greatest fruit. Come on, if you're struggling right now in your 40s, okay, don't give up. 40s and 50s, don't give up. Some of the best fruit of your life, you're going to see it that next season. Hang on. And then 60s and beyond, that's what's called the twilight years. Okay? And it's like little old people, if you make it that long, little old people walking around holding hands, if you're in the nursing home, kind of pinching the wrinkly butt. That's what I want to be doing, okay? It's going to happen, okay? Stealing each other's Jell-O, that's what I'm talking about, okay? But it has its own challenges. There's health challenges and changes in your life. Okay, Proverbs 24, verse 3 says this. By wisdom a house is built, and through understanding it's established. See, it's important for us to recognize and understand the season of marriage that we're in. I remember when my kids were little, this time of year was really difficult because in the early morning, they get ready to go to school. They want to put on their winter coat, right? Because it feels cold outside. They didn't recognize it. Just give it a couple hours and it's going to feel better. Come on, some of us, your marriage is thinking, this is cold, I don't like it, I want out. Can I tell you, if you hang on a little bit longer, conditions are going to change. If you don't like the weather, just give it a minute, okay? Don't give up on your marriage. And we have some counselors here, we have some pastors here. We would love to have those hard conversations and pray and fight with you. And we've got some incredible couples here in our church that I'm going to invite them to come on up our panel. We're hearing from some of the couples in our church. You want to come on at this time? Yeah, give them a hand. That represent some of the different seasons of life and marriage, and they're going to share some of their wisdom with us, okay? So as they're taking a seat, let's get the microphones. I want you to just introduce yourself and your spouse and how long you've been married and kind of, your situation, kids and whatnot, okay?
I'm Silas, this is my wife, Katie, and we will have been married for 8 years next month.
Yeah.
We have 2 children, 6 years old and 2.5.
My name's Chad, and this is my wife, Elizabeth Seeley. We almost married 17 years, coming up pretty soon. We have 3 kids, and he told me not to say nothing, but one of them's up there in the booth. Love you, Eli. Proud of you.
Al and Jane Baumsteig, we will be married 59 years next week. We have 3 children and 10 grandchildren.
Wow. That is wonderful. Well, let me ask you, what was that? I'm going to just kind of, and the way this is going to work is, not everyone needs to answer every question. If there's something that you really kind of feel like you have a good answer for, you want to share, jump right in. Make sure that you both spouses share. I want to hear from everybody. And then, so the first question is, what was it like when you first got married? What surprised you, and what adjustments did you have to make?
I'll go first, as the youngest up here. It was amazing when we first got married. I will say what surprised me the most was actually something about myself. I realized quickly that needed to work on effective communication. And I came into the marriage thinking that I had all the answers and that I had done enough, studying and talking to people about their marriages. And I came in thinking, that's going to be the easiest part because I'm really good at it. And here I am today sitting up here saying that was the most surprising thing to me, that I had a lot of work to do on effective communication with her. And that was alarming and kind of weird at first, because I would say something to her in response that was met with frustration. And I was like, oh my gosh, why is this happening? I'm really good at this. I'm really good at communicating. Why isn't she receiving this well? Come on. And so I learned we learned together, really, how to adjust that part of our marriage. And because I was not expecting it, and it kind of hit me blindside. But we grew a lot from that, and that honestly now is one of the best parts of our marriage and greatest strengths is how we communicate.
Yeah, I guess I'll just add to that. We just grew up with very different communication styles. So just learning to mesh those when you get married and like live with someone every day, learning that maybe when he says something and I take it as critique, it's not, he doesn't mean it that way. So it's just learning to understand where the other person is coming from, and not, what do I want to say? Like not hearing it in a way that comes from like my baggage or things that I need to work on, but understanding that he's coming from a place of love. And just learning to meet in the middle, I think was part of it for me was like a challenge. Just like learning to mesh our two communication styles and how to effectively talk to each other without it feeling like a personal attack or he thinks I'm a terrible wife or whatever,
I remember our first years of marriage being a lot of fun. We were more just playful and then also more spiritually focused. I think going into marriage, you're so prayerful and want to make sure you're doing the right thing and marrying the right person, that it was easier actually in the beginning to have that like, oh, we're praying together and we read the Bible together before there's as many distractions and as much baggage as well. And then I do think, in between service, I was thinking that those first years of marriage, I think we often speak about marriage how the Bible does, in this really positive way, as this beautiful picture. And then as time goes on, we start to talk about marriage in a very unbiblical way. Some of it's funny, right? Like, there's a lot of sitcoms that portray the husbands as like these morons and these wives as these high-strung and kind of cold women. And that's not how God talks about it, though. And I would just say as a church, whether you're married, whether you used to be married, we should still speak about it in the way God does, which is a picture of him and the church, a picture of faithfulness. So even with the trials and the things that are quite funny, to really be different than the world in that we should be speaking about it 20 years down the line, 10 years down the line, the same ways are in the beginning, which is that it's wonderful.
Oh, yeah. My wife said it all. I'm just going to pass the...
We met in seminary and graduated one day. The next day we went to Indiana from Kentucky and got married, jumped in the car. Someone had given us $100. We had a gas card and we were on our way across the U.S. for our first church. So we were not focused on each other or marriage. We were focused on ministry and what we were about. When did you say that?
Yep.
So,
Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Everything happened so quickly for us, so we adjusted while doing work, while we were doing what we were doing, and it was good. We learned a lot about each other. We'd spent 2 years in school together, well, not quite the same, but we knew what we were about, and we knew we had each other, and we just showed up every day.
That's good. So how is everybody here has kids, how has having kids changed your relationship, and how did you prioritize your marriage while having kids?
We'll go. I think for us, having kids change our relationship, in the obvious ways, like you have less time, you have less energy, you have little kids that need all of your attention, and just, for us, when we found out we were having our first child, it was quite a shock to us, and so just navigating that, and just kind of figuring out, like, our relationship will change, everything will change, and so we've just had to be really intentional about, even when we don't have the energy or we don't feel like we have the emotional capacity, to still make time for each other and check in. And even if it's just for a few minutes after the kids go to bed, it's like, hey, how are you doing? How was your day? Like, what are you struggling with? Or even like, what are you excited about right now? Like, what is God putting on your heart? And like praying for each other. And, a lot of days it feels like I'm too exhausted. Like, I answer questions all day long. I don't feel like asking you a bunch of questions, but just making sure that you make that time for your spouse to keep checking in on them, and to just keep pursuing them and knowing who they are.
And I will add to that is 100% a learned skill. It does not come naturally to any of us. If you struggle with that, it's not because there's something wrong with you Everybody struggles with that, and that is, like she said, a very intentional practice of paying attention to each other. Even if it's 10 minutes at the end of the day, at least you gave that amount of time to each other if that's all you have left. But yes, it's something that is a learned skill, and it doesn't come naturally to a lot of people. And again, kind of in the same situation like I mentioned before, just learning that as a husband and even as a father, noticing her exhaustion, but also just being there for her and giving her attention when she's been giving attention all day. I would say that's a very important thing to remember, even as a new husband, a new father, that it doesn't come naturally all the time, and it's something to work on and talk to people about.
Yeah, I think, having kids does change the dynamic of your marriage when you're first married, and, you have all this time to just go do whatever. But I don't necessarily think, it's a challenge, just like it's an added challenge in your marriage. It is, for sure. But I don't like to think about it or talk about it in like a negative sense, because sometimes we do. We're like, oh, the kids, this and that. Our kids, I believe, have enhanced our marriage and caused us to grow closer together. It is important to have that time individually, not only with my wife, but as the kids are involved, like to have that time with them too. And because we're a family unit, we're like a team, right? And so I think our marriage, and I think I said it before, is our marriage would look different if we didn't have kids. There's certain challenges that we probably wouldn't have faced. And those challenges, when we talk about seasons, we need to have those rainy seasons, those storms, to experience that fruit. And if we give up in the middle of a storm, then we don't get to experience what is produced. And it's funny because a couple guys this morning were talking about planting stuff and what type of soil and this type of thing, and it ties in with that. It's just, someone was talking about their peppers and how they have lots of peppers and they check on them 5 times a day. And that's really what it is just going through those seasons, knowing how to go through those seasons. And it's going to be rough. It's going to be stormy at times. But to work through those things and see the outcome of the hard work that you put in, taking care of your peppers and, allowing the rain, because if the rain doesn't come, there's not going to be any flowers and there's going to be things that wither and die. So.
And then our story is a little different too, because we're a blended family. So when we got married, I got a husband, and then I got a kid too, which for me, I did feel like I won the lottery. Like I got like a 2-for-1. I didn't have to be pregnant or go through labor. And so it was kind of a nice, gentle introduction to motherhood, and did set me up kind of for the mindset of the kids, like really whatever kids, however they came into your life, aren't ours. Ultimately, they're God's. And so as the stepmom who didn't have legal rights to my child, I feel like it did give me that perspective of like, that's right. Like I'm going to love and honor in this household, but ultimately he's God's, And so it was a nice way to, I think, start out parenting. And then also we did get that, newlywed time. And then, because we did have, back and forth where he wasn't always with us. So we kind of got both of those. So that was kind of a different way to do it. And then once the 24/7 baby, tired, that kind of parenting came into play. Like Chad said, it's the deepest roots you'll get, I think, as a couple. They'll bring you the most joy, also the potential for the most pain. But I think the roots that you build over those tired years really do help for the later years when the pain changes. And then similar to marriage, I do think as a church, same thing, we need to speak about kids how God does, right? They are always given as a blessing. They're never given as a punishment. They are not parasites. They're only a gift. And so that doesn't negate the fact that there's a lot of trials with it. But in a society that isn't always honoring full lives of children, we need to speak the truth that they are always given as a gift only.
What? Oh, okay. Let's swallow this. Our children were part of the mission we were on, and they were probably one of our biggest evangelists. I remember in Fresno, a coach came to church and said, we wanted to meet the father of this kid. You know, he was on his team and he liked him so well. So they always felt a part of it. They led the youth groups. So our children. The question is really how it impacted us. We rejoiced having such great children.
I think part of it too was after we pastored 5 years, then we went to Brazil for 7 years. And I think that for me really became a new sense of family, because in the United States we knew everything. We knew language, we knew situations. There weren't any surprises. Adapting to children, we loved them. They were with us. Got to Brazil, we had to really become a family because we all started at the same place. We didn't know the language, you didn't know the culture, didn't know the circumstances. You got sick, what kind of sickness do you have? So we really, for my money, we really became, for me, the family. It wasn't just the mission. We needed each other, we enjoyed each other. We discovered everything the same, because for us it was when we were seeing Foz do Iguaçu, something like that. We saw it as a family. When we did a trip, we did everything as a family. And so that was, for me, a sense that when we came back after 7 years, I didn't want to go back to the other way. Change my whole scope. What are my kids doing? I told my board I will not miss any soccer matches or any event unless an emergency. But I'll go to work at 5 in the morning if it makes you feel better that I work my 8 hours. But we never went back to what it was. We were more family there. I discovered family in a new way in our years in Brazil.
That's good. Different question for you guys. Anybody can answer this, and you don't have to. But what challenges have shaped your marriage the most?
I'd say, may I answer it?
Sure.
I'd say for us personally, we get to the part about getting old, okay? But I would say the challenges of health, cancer shows up, it kind of makes a lot of challenges.
Yeah.
I'd say that's the part that put the most stress, because you're the most helpless during those periods of times. Our kids and our grandkids have God has blessed us with all the things that are good about that. But I think just getting older, realizing we can't do all that we used to do, helpless. What are you going to do when you got chemo? What are you going to do when you're struggling with this? And I'd say that was how to prepare that, needing each other even more than we needed each other before.
Wow.
Because today I'm down and tomorrow she's down, and learning how to be patient with someone that's not well. I mean, this was for us the most time we really needed to adapt to each other on an ongoing way. And with the expectations, it's not going to get any better. It's not like, oh, wait till next year. No, who wants to wait till next year? Got all we can handle this year. That's where we are.
Wow.
Do you want to say anything, honey?
Well, I think, I guess I'll let you speak, but speak for my wife. We went through a very challenging season, and I'm pretty much like the cause of that. But so I used to work with Pastor Eli. I used to be a correctional officer. And just the challenge of what I went through, I woke up in the middle of the night with a gun in my hand, and my career ended overnight. I got diagnosed with PTSD, and it was, that career had changed me, who she had married, and so it was a challenge for her, and it was probably more challenging for her than it was for me in dealing with what I was dealing with. But I am thankful that I have a wife that through those challenges, through those rough times, those times that I was not the man that she married, that she stood by my side. And it's weird because through that whole season, I'm thankful for that season now as we're through it. There are some rough times, still deal with some of that stuff, personally. But I think those seasons really grew our marriage, really brought us closer together. And so that's why when I talk about those seasons and those storms, it can get pretty rough. But I think having that commitment to that person that you promise to be with in sickness and in health, you know, for better, for worse, till death do you part. You know, we make more of a commitment to some of our sports teams than we do to people that we love. And so to be long-suffering with one another and to take those things seriously is important.
Yeah, and I think for me during that time, you weren't, right? Like, he wasn't the man I married, and all those things that were fun in the beginning years were getting more and more scarce. And I remember plenty of times on my knees just kind of giving up that ideal I had in my head about, like, having this awesome, amazing spouse, because he was struggling. And so God was kind of, and he said this to me in multiple situations, like, yeah, but your job still hasn't changed. You trust me and you obey me. And that's when, for any life situation, right? And there's always reward, there's always beauty when you act in obedience, and there's always death and destruction when you act in sin, right? So had I chosen to say, yeah, but I don't like this isn't the man I married, it was only going to lead one way, which would be to destruction. And so I kind of just gave up on the idea of having an awesome marriage and just decided to try and be faithful to it. And he brought us through it, and obviously it's kind of weird being up here. It's not like we've got it all figured out now. But he definitely carried us through that season, and the roots we gained are so deep. And I wouldn't change it, because the roots we have are so deep that even though kind of right now we have a situation that's difficult, but I feel like we're so much stronger for it. And so, yeah, like just that faithfulness, just trust and obey regardless of what your spouse is doing.
I'll say from where we're at in our lives, we were blessed with a lot of marital advice. Even before we were married, you know, we were blessed with a lot of resources, church families, surrounded by family and friends. And I think now that I'm truly pondering it, I think that a big challenge, and maybe one of the biggest challenges, was figuring out what to do with all of it. Because you get a lot of different people giving you different words of advice about, here it comes, or be prepared for this, and so just, trying to bank all of that and figuring out, what do I do with all of this good information? And so I think what I've taken away from all of it is just realizing not to just go through these early years and get through them, but to be intentional about thriving through them. And these are awesome years that we have right now, and those words of advice have really helped us to soak in that and not take it for granted, because we're laying the foundation for the rest of our lives. And I thank God for the people and our parents and our church for helping us just really realize that and to honor that in a godly way.
That's really good. Last question. So we have different seasons represented here. So what would you say to someone who is getting ready to go into the season that you're in? So whether it be, early years or young kids, or, a married couple that their kids are starting to go into those teenage years, or you're, empty nesters, or just those retirement years. What would you say to someone getting ready to enter the season that you're in?
I would just say to people who maybe are not even yet married, or are in the early stages of marriage, or you don't have kids yet. When you get married, you're marrying a person who is broken or has their own baggage, or has, things from the way they were raised that maybe, you think you've healed, you think you've worked through. But having kids can bring that up in ways. I had a couple conversations with people in between services, and having kids can bring up those traumas or hurts that you maybe thought you worked through, but maybe you haven't fully yet. And I would just say, before you even get married, if you're not married yet, or before you have kids, just talk through those things and, get that healing, go to therapy, whatever it is, before you have kids, because getting married and having kids is not an answer. It doesn't solve your problems. It a lot of times complicates the things that you have lived through or are going through. And so, I mean, even for us, like before we had kids, I had all these ideas of how I would be as a mom and how I would parent our kids and all these things. And once we had kids, like I am very different than I thought I would be as a mom, which for him, I told Silas, I was like, oh, I will never, like, we will just let our kids cry it out. We will not pick them up. And I'm like, oh no, my baby, they're crying. And so I think for him, it was just, you know, like allowing yourselves grace to change as you grow as people and as you walk through different seasons of parenthood.
Oh.
I'll say something. I think, you know, if I was talking to someone who is going to get married or someone who's struggling in their marriage right now, I think the words that come to mind is just hold on, and go back to that place, that day that you got married, when you looked into that person's eyes and the things that you thought about them, the reasons why you married that person. Because sometimes we can focus on the negative things in life so much that it clouds out the good things. You know, if there's so many things that are bothering me about my wife, or we're at head about whatever, I need to look at the things that I married her for, the positive things that I see in her, the things that I love about her. And even if I don't feel like it, I need to look at those things and be like, yes, she does this well. Yes, she does this well. And as I focus on those positive things, those negative things tend to fall off. And I tend to just fall back in love with my wife. I think, you know, sometimes we just focus so much on the negative things. And also, I would tell them, you know, it's like I said before, when you come back to that place where we made that promise, you know, and I use that analogy. I said some people will just die for these teams that they, you know, that they support, sports teams or whatever. They have so much commitment to that, even when their team's, you know, not doing well. But we're so quick to throw in the towel on people, especially the people that are close to us. And to just remember that promise that I made, you know, and not take it lightly, that, you know, in sickness and health, for better or for worse, you know, when your husband wakes up with a gun in his hand and has totally changed because of this department that he's working in. My wife really lived that out, and I'm thankful for that. But, you know, to not give up on each other. Remember the reason why you got married, the reason why you made that promise. And so.
And then, and the other thing is just like the deliberation, right? Like you guys said, like, does it come naturally? We're not just all naturally awesome parents, awesome communicators, great at finances and house chores. And so, like, fix it. We did a Dave Ramsey course like years ago, and our arguments about finances plummeted. I mean, truly. And I do feel like there would have been benefit had we done the same thing with like parenting courses. You know, like I took one, so I was on this page, and then, you know, he has a totally different style, which is fine, but you should still be on the same page, you know. Chores, we could use a lot of help in that. If you guys know of any courses, we're open. The Norwoods would also like some help with that. And then even like physical intimacy, that's another hot button topic. But like if something's wrong in that apartment, get it fixed. I had like complications after birth that I needed like medical intervention for some of that. And so like whatever it is, whether it's emotional, physical, organizational, like just, you know, like fix it, put in the work.
Yeah, things that are worth it are worth working toward and for. I think I said it before, if your golf swing was horrible and you really wanted to be good at golf, you'd spend time learning how to swing that golf club. And if you want to be good in your marriage, you're going to find those areas where they're weak, and you're going to put in the work.
I think what keeps coming up in my mind, and as we looked over these questions earlier, is that I keep thinking about the God component in a marriage, like a triangle. And we were so busy with life that, you know, God always seemed to get the short end of our quiet time, for me anyway, the time that we really want to listen to God and hear Him. And so being disciplined in a quiet time together, and we're still, even after almost 60 years, we're now saying, okay, this might be a better time to have our devotions together. And how can we do more with this special time together? Because, and especially going into marriage, you need to listen to God. And the other couple words that come to my mind in terms of advice is always remembering that your husband, your partner, your children, they're all gifts from God.
That's good.
And I think that it's really hard to be angry or upset at someone when they're God's gift to you. And so I think keeping that in mind is great. And one of the things that kept our marriage together, probably more than anything else, is Al's humor. Just it was fun.
Awesome.
That's good. That's
Well,
good.
thank you so much. I want to say a big thank you to everyone on our panel. I wish we had more time to have conversation, but I want to let you know that each and every one of these people, they would love, if you have questions, take them out for a cup of coffee, lunch. They would love to talk with you. They would love to encourage you to grow in your marriage. So what a great resource we have here. Thank you once again. You guys can take a seat. I'm going to invite the worship team to come on back at this time. What a wonderful reminders they've given us here today. As they're going, I'm reminded of an old saying that said, a woman gets married, or women get married expecting that they can change their husband will change, and then realize that he doesn't. And men get married thinking that their wife won't change and realizing that she does. But the reality is we are changing all the time. The seasons change, they cycle, and the same thing is true in our marriages. And some seasons are harder than others. When you have kids, it feels like you go from one day you're driving the bus to the next day you're being drugged by the bus, And the same thing happens when you have adult children, I'm told. One day, you're driving the relationship, you're making the decisions. Next thing you know, the bus is left without you, and you're chasing after the bus. You just want a seat on the bus to be a part of the relationship. And when your kids are little and they're at home, those busy years, it's so easy to turn a marriage into a business relationship, a business partnership. Okay, you're going to take care of this, and I'm going to take care of that. You're going to run Johnny here, and I'm going to pay this bill. But the question is what happens when the business of raising children is over? What are we left with? I want to encourage you, fight for your marriage. Fight for your marriage. Colossians 4 verse 2 says this. It says, devote yourselves to prayer with an alert mind and a thankful heart. Keep praying about the hard things. Keep coming together and praying together. There's a stat that says couples that regularly pray together have a 96% chance that their marriage will never end in divorce. Right? It's hard to stay mad at someone that you are consistently praying for and praying with. Keep praying about the hard things. It's so amazing. The verse says, devote yourselves to prayer with an alert mind and a thankful heart. We can do both, meaning we can stay alert, we can stay focused on those things that are on the horizon, those difficulties and those challenges in our marriage. We don't just sweep them under the rug. We don't just pretend like they're not there. We can do that, and yet at the same time, have a thankful heart. As Chad said, we can be grateful for as Jane said, for the gift that God has brought in our life. Our marriage is a gift from God. Yeah, it's difficult right now. It's challenging right now. But God, thank you. Thank you that the work you started, not just in my life, but in my marriage and in my family, you said you're going to see it through. And that's such good news, because if it was just on me to see my family through to the finish line, we're kind of